Well, good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, my fellow activists and dear friends. I'm pleased to be here representing my own organization, the Women at Risk International Foundation, WARIF, a non-profit organization addressing the prevalence of gender-based violence in Nigeria. And I'm also here representing the Act to End Violence Against Women and Girls program, Global Civil Society Steering Committee, as the West and Central Africa representative. ACT is a new game-changing commitment between the European Commission and UN Women as co-leaders of the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence in collaboration with the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women. Now, we're all aware that significant strides have been made by member states in ending violence against women. However, we also know that the prevalence of gender-based violence remains 1 in 3 women who will experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. And as we approach 2030, this is a human rights issue that must be addressed to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at this critical juncture. There is a backlash against gender equality and the shrinking civic space with devastating consequences for women and girls. Around the world, we're seeing increasing resistance to gender equality efforts, and this is manifesting in numerous ways. This has legislative rollbacks or stagnation and regressive laws. There's a defunding of the women's rights initiatives across the world, and there is a rise of anti-feminist narratives. The UN Secretary General Beijing Plus 30 report found that 1 in 4 countries reported that this backlash has hampered progress on gender equality in the past 5 years. A fine example is in Africa, where the recent upholding of the Women's Amendment Act of 2015, which prohibits female genital mutilation in the Gambia, was upheld. And though this outcome was an encouragement, it also serves as a warning that our rights are not guaranteed. These trends are undermining our efforts to prevent and respond to the violence against women and girls effectively. Now, one of the greatest obstacles in ending violence against women is this entrenched culture of impunity that allows perpetrators, whether they're intimate partners, political figures, and even armed groups, to act without consequence. Globally, less than 10% of women who experience violence report it to the police. This is either out of fear or the stigmatization of their communities, or a lack of trust in the justice system. And across the world, as the UN Executive Director, Madame Bahous, mentioned, women's rights organizations are the lifeline to these women and girls experiencing various forms of violence by delivering critical frontline and essential services. Yet, these organizations remain severely underfunded, with less than 1% of the official development assistance reaching them, according to an OECD analysis. Organizations like mine, WARIF, in countries like Nigeria, who operate on a community level, are often the only networks of support available to these women at risk. And we rely on this targeted funding to drive meaningful change in many of these communities, without which essential services such as shelter, legal aid, and psychosocial support for survivors of violence are disrupted. This compromises both their immediate care and the long-term sustainability of our programs, eroding the trust within the affected communities. As civil society organizations, we are the experts of what women and girls need. We hold the knowledge, the connections to communities, and we work tirelessly to develop the innovative solutions and to adapt the support in the different contexts. This could be from climate disasters that we see, to global emergencies like the COVID-19, and to conflict situations. We know what works and the needs of the survivors, yet many are now at risk of closure or operating with very limited resources. However, we are not here to spend all day talking about the challenges, but also to propose concrete solutions to accelerate our collective efforts in ending violence against women and girls. Together with fellow activists and other women's rights organizations, under the ACT program, we are calling for 3 priority actions. 1, to make bold investments in prevention and responses to ending violence against women and girls. The cost of inaction is significant. Beyond the incalculable human suffering, conservative estimates indicate that governments lose up to 4% of their GDP due to violence against women. So investing in preventing and eliminating violence against women is not only a human rights imperative, it also saves lives, and it can also save costs. We need to see these investments in evidence-based interventions, changing harmful social norms that are prevalent in many of these communities, engaging men and boys as allies in breaking down these harmful stereotypes. The second point we would like to raise is that the Act to End the Violence Against Women's and Girls Program's shared advocacy agenda wants bold investments to women's rights organizations in the strengthening of financing, protection, and support of these organizations. Because as many have said here today, the studies have confirmed that the role of these organizations, like WARIF and other sister organizations here in this room, are often the most critical factor in the reduction of large-scale violence. And flexible long-term funding and investments are necessary to sustain them. Urgent action needs to be taken to end violence against women, as well as the human rights defenders that strengthen the protective mechanisms and continue the work in the field. The last point that we would like to see is the strengthening of accountability, access to justice, and a full and effective implementation of laws to prevent and respond to violence against women. We need to build on our successes as we strengthen our legal frameworks with robust protections for women's rights. We need to leverage on strategic legal frameworks that have already been adopted, like the AU Convention on Ending Violence Against Women in Africa that was held in February of 2015. This represented a historic milestone in Africa, signaling a continent-wide recognition of the need for stronger protection for women. We also have to leverage against the model law on tackling tech-facilitated violence as developed by my sisters in Latin America. In conclusion, violence against women and girls is preventable. There is evidence of what works. We need to see governments invest in comprehensive approaches to unlock financing through the various sectors of health, education, social service, and protection. Let us build together. Let us have coalitions that amplify our voices and enhance the collective advocacy efforts. Let's broaden alliances with greater intersectionality. For by committing to these strategies, we can effectively combat violence against women and girls and safeguard the invaluable gains that we have all made together. Let us all reaffirm our dedication to this critical fight for this human rights and equality. The time to act is now. Thank you very much.